Hello and welcome to my basic tutorial on spline modeling. Well, high poly spline modeling. Um, it's one of many ways to model something in 3ds Max, and personally I prefer it on my high poly models. It really depends on the scenario and what you are trying to make. But let's get to it. So what we're going to be making is this guy right here. I figured it's not that complex of a shape, so it's a great thing for a tutorial. It uses we're gonna use floaters for this and to define these little shapes over here, and then we're gonna also connect the geometry over here, and we're gonna learn a few cool tips and techniques that will help you make more and more complex things as we go along. As you can see, it also has a base we're gonna make, and we're gonna make it all one piece, even if it isn't displayed as that in here. It's all for the sake of learning. So let's get right into it. Personally, I have 2 monitors. Actually, I have 3. But if you have a second monitor or a different screen you can put it on so you can look at what you're making as you go, that is always desirable. Personally, if you really want to get into 3D and you want to have a much faster workflow, I think it's almost essential. So let's get into making it now that I've told you that. So under the Create panel, which is right here, we're going to click Shapes and then Lines. We're going to go into any orthographic viewport that we feel comfortable in. Personally, I either do my top viewport or my left viewport. You press those by pressing T for top, L for left, P for perspective, B for bottom, and you can access the rest by right-clicking over here. Let's just go to our left viewport for now. Now, as you can see, if you look at the shape, it is pretty much just an extruded angular box with a few extrusions here, a few extrusions here. But in our case, we're just going to draw this main shape out. And we're going to include these little bumps. So let's get right into that. So on here, we can just click with line selected. Click, and we're going to draw out our first line. You can see how the lines get segmented, and you can see how they have all these pixels that just look very jaggedy. Well, let's try to make it as smooth as possible when there's no jaggy, so you know you've got a good edge. So let's make our first one here, and then our next one here. We're going to start trying to draw out the shape as if it were flat, which it is not. And then for this next side, it actually doesn't matter, and I'll get into that in a second. Just kind of make it roughly what you want it to be. Bring this to here and go up. Now the reason I said it doesn't matter on this side is because we are going to now that all of these are connected, you want to make sure this is all connected. If you didn't close this spline up here, it's not going to convert to an editable poly. So right click, editable poly. If it didn't work like that, then you did it wrong, restart it, and restart drawing the shape, and then you want to make sure you close it. Because if it's not closed shape, it won't show up. So now what we're going to do is we are going to press F4 to turn on edged faces, press G to turn off our grid. And now we have an outlined shape. And we're going to start breaking it into quads in a second. So the first thing I like to do is to show why we don't need this side. And that is because we are going to add a symmetry modifier right down the middle, therefore making this perfectly even on each side, which is one of the main issues you'd come across with spline modeling. So in order to do that, you want to select this face, and you want to click Symmetry. And it's also in this list. As I've said before in my last lesson, you can use the configure modifier sets and configure to add and show them. You right click or click show buttons and then they show up here. I personally have them up here, but I'm going to use this list for the sake of the tutorial because that's most likely what you have if you're getting into 3ds Max. Click Symmetry, and as you can see now, it has mirrored the sides, but the wrong sides on the x-axis, which is what we want to do. Left and right. There's y, z, but we want the x. And we want to click Flip, and now it's using the right sides. So we're going to right-click this, right-click this symmetry modifier, collapse all, and now it's an editable poly with a line right down where we did the symmetry modifier, which is actually very helpful later. If you ever want to make another symmetry modifier, just click on that line and add symmetry. Okay, so now you can see we have a very odd shape. It doesn't really represent what this actually looks like. So we're going to clean that up a little bit. So, whoops. Press, click and drag, and press Control, hold down Control, select those vertices. You get to vertex selection by pressing 1 if you're not familiar. Again, like I said, go do my first Intro to 3ds Max High Poly Modeling and rendering tutorial. It will explain it all. I'd also recommend the free tutorials on the Intro to 3ds Max by Digital Tutor. Those will really help you for all of these tutorials, and I recommend it before doing any of my tutorials. So first we are going to select both of these shapes, and then we're going to press R. This brings up our scaling tool. So on the x-axis, with this selected, click and drag inward, and that'll shorten up those edges. You could also do it using the Y, but that is not right. Press Ctrl Z if you make a mistake to go backwards. Now that we have these shapes, if we look at this, it actually slants down a little bit, and that's also not including the fact that this is actually a more rounded shape than it appears. But we'll get into that later. So let's grab these two, press W, and drag them down just a little bit. That looks good. And for now, we actually have our basic shape pretty much done. We'll get into the rest later. So what we're going to want to do is press 4, select these faces, and we're going to add an extrusion. Get it about the thickness. Actually, let's do it a different way. Press 3 on your keyboard, select the edges, shift and click back, shift and drag back, and then after you're done, you can just kind of adjust that without holding shift. Get it to a size you want. Press the cap button down here. So, as you can see, if we were to turbo smooth this, obviously it wouldn't work, because we don't have any loops or edge loops defining it at all. It just looks awful. Besides that, you can see we've got something going on here. This is one huge, huge end-gon. There's absolutely nothing. At least here we have a shape, or a line dividing it. So what we want to do is unsmooth this, use the cut tool, and cut down our object to connect them there. And then that will clean it up a little bit more, but it's still not quads. As you can see, we can't add any edge loops except for on the edges. So what we want to continue doing is breaking this into quads. So you're going to drag these down. Whoops. They could be much cleaner. Sometimes it doesn't work, so you can actually oftentimes click from the bottom up and it works. I don't really understand why it does that sometimes, but it just depends. Now let's say we want to improve our workflow. So what we're going to do is click this middle one, Symmetry Modifier, flip, and then we have that done. So instead of doing every single line, we just had to draw half of it instead of having to draw the whole thing. Then that comes up, we need to do the back. Well, who wants to do the back? We just did the front. Why do it again? So we add it up here. We click this thing, and then we add a symmetry modifier on the z-axis. Sometimes, depending on how you've drawn your shape, it may not be the exact same axes as mine. So it really just depends, but in this case I use the z. I'm going to collapse it. And then the last thing left to do is to connect these little lines up. So go to 1, let's connect them. Sometimes you could add a symmetry modifier in the middle to not have to do both sides, but that probably would actually take slightly more time. So just finish that up. And now we've successfully broken our model into quads. And then we're going to want to keep defining this basic shape. Actually, let's press 6 on our keyboard to unselect all of our sub-object selections. Go to R and make it just a little bit thicker, at least in my case. I don't know about yours. And now we have the basic first part of our model. Now we want to get this little extrusion right here. So what we're going to do is we're going to use edge loops to split our model up into pieces. As you can see, this line isn't flat, so what you want to do is under your modifier panel, scroll down to Make Planner, click that. You can also alternately use the different types. Some won't work how you want them to, so just make sure you're using the right one. But in this case, it made it totally flat, and it looks much, much better. So what we're going to do is select these two faces, and these are going to be our extrusions that help get the basic shape of it. We're going to click the extrude settings under your modifier panel with the faces selected, and probably turn that to 8. That looks good. That looks a lot more like our reference object now, at least the basic shape of it. We'll get into bending it much later. Since this is a high poly model, it doesn't really matter how high the polygon count is. So let's make sure it's the right dimensions. As you can see, mine is actually a little bit too wide. So what I'm going to do is, I'm just going to, in this case, I'm going to select these polygons here and here, click the scale tool, scale them in. It doesn't always work like that. You can do it many, many ways, but that's just what I decided to do. So now let's start adding edge loops that define this object a little bit more and make it a high poly object. So we're going to want to click here, 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 here. And as you can see, if we subdivide this, let's apply our subdivision material if you were in the high poly modeling tutorial. And now we can subdivide it. You can see it's much smoother and starting to look more mechanical, but we just have to finish roughing out this shape. You may be thinking, hey, why isn't it bent? The one in here is bent. Well, we're not there yet. We're not even close. So let's just keep defining this object with our edge loops. It may take a few tries, but oftentimes, oh, another thing, you can see how these get defined up here. Farther away, they get lower. Well, all that really matters is this edge here. So it doesn't matter if these are up here. It doesn't matter what's in the middle of this shape, just what matters on the edges. If you understand what I'm saying. I know it's kind of a vague concept, but once you get it down, it's not that big a deal. So you're only going to want to model like half of this model, and then we'll use the same. We'll mirror the defining support loops over, so that way you don't have to do it twice, and that way it's much more even. So we're going to click up here and define that shape. We want it to be a little bit bigger of a thing since it's such a huge chunk of metal. And it's not really more of a defined precision piece. It's just methodically slowly going through. If you want, you can just press NURBS. You can kind of look at how your model's starting to come together. Just needs to be defined a little bit more. And then we've almost reached the halfway point, which is right there. And it's starting to, I'm starting to think that we've got everything covered. If we turn off edge faces, we can take a look. And you can see, yeah, we've got it done good enough for this tutorial. We'll be thinking about all that. We're going to do that in a few seconds here, and then add these as well. Another thing that's important, things like this, those little things right there, you're going to want to add those before you make it a final subdivision, or just use, NURBS. But I mean, let's say use Turbo Smooth. Well, it's going to make it impossible to add geometric or just geometry to that shape because there's just so many polygons, especially if you subdivide it a lot. It's just going to be almost impossible to move and use. So what we're going to do now is mirror this over with our Symmetry modifier like we did before. And if you look at it now, turn those iterations up, it is all good to go. And we can get into the next part of our modeling, which is adding the rest of the shapes. I still think I made it a little bit too big, so I'm going to select all these vertices, drag this in, symmetry it, call it good. Okay. So now what we want to do is we are going to add that geometry that we see here. Now, normally we could do something like, well, in this case, we're going to use AutoGrid and make a sphere instead of using just splines, because sometimes it's not useful. So AutoGrid, what it does is it allows you to draw on the surface of an object. For example, like that. It's a very, very, very useful tool, and I use it all the time. So what we're going to want to do is draw basically that exact same shape that we saw before. Try to keep it within the lines. Some of these edges here, depending on how yours came out, it really will change. Try to get it a little bit thinner, like we see in here. As you can see also, it's more rounded. I'm assuming this is a hard edge, hard edge, hard edge, hard edge, hard edge, instead of being one rounded shape. So what we want to do is kind of position this where it would be positioned on our model, which is right on this edge right here. And you're going to see what we're going to do in a second. So you're going to, with this shape made, you're going to right click, isolate selection, go back to the back of it where it's touching that other model, and we're going to make an editable poly. Press 4 on your keyboard, and we are going to click on this back face here and delete that. You'll see the reason for it in a little bit. And just for clarity's sake, I prefer to make my models either gray or use the same material, just so it looks a little bit nicer. And it just makes things a little bit easier on the eyes. We're going to exit isolation mode. Depending on what version of Max you have, it may be different. 2012, I don't know anything before 2012, but 2012 opens a dialog box on your screen where you click exit isolation mode. 2013 doesn't have that, so we just click isolate selection no more. Or no longer, just unisolate the selection. This time we're going to isolate this. Before you isolate it, remember those lines that you have it inside of. And we're going to isolate it and delete that face. There's many ways to do this, but this is crucial for our part of the lesson. So you can see now I have a shape that if we go into pressing F3, we can go into wireframe mode. You can see that there's no longer anything here, and it's just this shape and this shape. So what we're going to do is select these edges right here. Actually, no, sorry. Wrong way to do this. We are going to deselect this, or deselect any of our sub-object modes. Go down to attach under edit geometry in your modifier panel with this object selected. Click attach, and now these are both part of the same shape. Even if they aren't selected, they're part of the same shape. Click on this edge on the square that we made, or this rectangular prism we made, and you are going to want to click target up here in your ribbon, your graphite modeling tools ribbon. You can maximize this or minimize it with this little button if you don't have it already available. So use the target mode, select one vertice, and select the next. And now these two vertices are connected. You just want to keep doing that on all four corners. Then now, while it's not a perfect model, this is just a tutorial, so it's not really important. Now if you see, when you smooth it, it's all one model. Looks awkward, so you up the smoothing amount. Looks a little bit more natural because it's still connected. We need to define this shape to make it truly a natural model, or make it look less ridiculous. So we're going to add our Swift loops like usual. Let's only add one for now. Go into edge faces mode, edge mode, and click these two edges. And what we're going to do is we're going to try to get this shape right here. So to get that, we're going to click chamfer. I prefer to use the settings mode. It will allow us to be a little bit more precise in how we want it. And then click OK. And now we have that basic shape. So we're going to continue. Actually, let's break this into quads. So with vertex mode selected, which you don't have to use this, it just makes it easier to visualize. We're going to break this back into quads because it created a huge n-gon, which makes it difficult to apply edge loops. So now that we have this broken into quads, this is all one shape, and we are ready to just finish up this final thing. As you can see now, though, that it comes up with an issue where it messes with all of this geometry. Well, as long as it doesn't go over these lines right here that define these edges, it really doesn't matter. So we're going to look at this part right here. It gets really tight. So what we're going to do is we're going to put it how we want it up here, which is nice and not super tight. Use vertice selection, pull these down, and then we can get a little bit less tight over there. And do the same up here. Get that a little bit more even. Actually, let's redo that. I made that edge loop way too loose. I just want to remind you that this isn't going to be a perfect model because this is just a quick tutorial, but it should teach you a lot of fundamental things about high poly modeling, and especially using splines and how it can make things much more efficient. At least for me, I prefer to use it in my workflow. It really depends on the person. Sometimes your edges won't want to select. Sometimes you have to zoom out for it to do it. For whatever reason, it can just be kind of a pain, but just work around it, and you'll get the results you want. I think that's good. Let me turn on nerves. Yep, that looks great. I mean, if we wanted, we could make it a little bit different. Generally, if I was making this shape, I wouldn't connect it, but just because I can, and it'll teach you some really useful tools, I connected this to make it all one piece. So now one thing's left to do, at least for this part, before we get into making the rest, is just to mirror this over. And now you have your basic shape. And again, these things right here, sorry for not having a cursor, but these things right here, you turn up your divisions and it looks much better. Or your subdivision iterations. So before we go around, and we could easily go and be like, oh yeah, let's bend the crap out of this. Let's make this look like the model. Let's make this look cool. That's not what we're doing yet. We need to finish adding these details right here. Not necessarily where the bullet impacts are, but this, and this. It's actually quite more simple than you'd think, because you probably are thinking at this point, oh man, we have to go in and we have to make all those shapes inside the geometry, and we have to go like this and select all these and whatever, and then we have to extrude them and inside, and we have to scale them in, and then we have to make shapes like that. Well, no, that's not what we're doing, and that's not even a logical way to work. At least with high poly modeling, in most cases, that's not logical. So we're going to use what are called floaters. So go into your left view, and we are now in our left orthographic view, and we're going to take a quick look at our image. As you can see, it's basically just a box with some minor adjustments. And we're going to draw this out with splines. So start here. Remember, have AutoGrid on. That way you're drawing on top of the object. It just makes it easier and avoids any issues. Just draw out the basic shapes of the object. We'll worry about straightening out those edges later. Even though it's kind of hard not to because I'm OCD about it. Remember, the less edge loops you have, or the less edges you have or vertices you have, the easier it is to split into quads. So now, like we did last time, we're going to make this an editable poly. And we just want to start getting these lines nice and well shaped. We can isolate that selection too. That's also something I like to do just to make it a little bit easier. By now, though, you should be able to do this stuff fairly quick, even if you have to pause my tutorial a few times just to catch up. That's totally understandable. I added a little extra vertice here. You just select that, backspace, and delete it. It's looking fairly good, so add a symmetry modifier like we did last time. And now we're almost ready. We just have to, like we did last time, we're going to split this into quads. Actually, let's not do it this way. We're going to go into face polygon selection mode. I'm tired. It's like 1 a.m. So we're going to inset this with our inset settings in the panel, in the modifier panel. And then after we inset it, you can see that we now have all quads along the edges, and this is what we're going to inset, or actually make the depth. This part is going to be set by this. You'll see it in a little bit. It'll make more sense than me explaining it. So we're going to now connect this, make it all quads, which is important for having proper deformations. It's okay to make new edges if you have to. Don't worry about it. As long as you maintain those quads, you'll generally be pretty good. It takes quite a bit of practice to get it right, but you should be able to do it fairly easily. So now we are going to select these faces that we have that are on the inner part. And with those selected, bring them back till you think you have about the depth of this shape right here. And I'd say it goes back a good 5 or so inches. That looks about right. Now if you're probably thinking, oh, okay, that's odd. It's inside my shape too. Well, now it looks like it's actually a part of your shape, and if we subdivide that, you can see that, oh wow, it actually kind of blends in. Now, of course, this is low poly, so it obviously adds quite a bit of confusion. So we're going to make this floater a little bit better, and we're going to make it high poly. And it's fairly similar to any regular shape. We just need to define these edges. So use edge loops. Generally on floaters, it really doesn't matter how how good your edge loops are, as long as they work and it looks good in the high poly. Who cares? Because it's just something that oftentimes I'll go around and I'll make 100 iterations of different types of floaters for an object, and oftentimes it's not worth taking the time to hand make them or do all sorts of stuff. So you can see, even though I was a little bit fast, you'll get it. Now when I subdivide it, it gets smoother edges and it looks much more natural. Let me subdivide that even more. And now it's truly part of the geometry, but yet at the same time it's not. And you could shrink it, add more, do whatever you want. And that's the beauty of having floating geometry, because it gives you that flexibility. Now to make it perfectly in the middle, we're going to use our align tool up here, and we are going to, with this floater selected, select our back object, and we are going to set it to only the X position in the center. And this will make it even on both sides. And I use that quite a bit when I'm modeling things. Then you might have to adjust it. Make sure it's not penetrating the geometry and it's totally off of the geometry 100%. There's no touching. If it's close, it's fine. Just make sure it's not touching, because it won't look great. With something like this, because we're going to be bending all of these objects, you want to probably turbo smooth that quite a bit, just because it's a floater. It's really not something we're going to edit ever again. Let's see, what else do we have? There is a little shape down here. We aren't going to bother that, but we'll do something up here. Just make it kind of cool. Just add a little bit more detail. So let's draw out a box. Just like this. It's okay, just make it kind of thin. We're not even going to use half of it anyway. And we want to make this an editable poly. And then delete those faces. So now we're left with one face. Go back into your thing, apply a material, or the material that you're using. And to add some excitement to it, really do whatever you feel is going to look cool. In this case, we're just going to make this kind of like our last one, except I want to select these edges and use the connect tool. Hopefully you already have a basic understanding of all these things, so you really shouldn't need my help. Leave comments in under my video on how you think I should approach them, if I'm approaching them slow enough or not fast enough. I prefer to be very thorough though, because I remember when I was learning that I wish that there was more thoroughness in all of my tutorials that I watched, and there just really wasn't. So I'm hoping to help some people out by not having that. So I'm just making some random shapes here to kind of make it a little more interesting. Modeling can be a pretty tedious process, but then again, it's all about getting to see what you make inside of a game engine, and it can be a lot of fun, and it's all about you making the process fun. Sometimes it can be super boring, but it's only as fun as you make it, and you just have to make the best of what you want to do. I mean, personally, I enjoy it. I find it relaxing, but sometimes doing too much can get really irritating. Just work hard at it, get better at it, and always be learning, because no matter how good you think you are, you can always do better. That's just a fact. Okay, then we got some stupid looking floater here, and we'll apply some letters using the text. So under Create Spline Shapes, go to Text with AutoGrid selected, drag it onto here. In our modifier panel, write UNSC or poop, whatever you want. I don't care. Turn down the size in centimeters. Convert it to an editable poly. Drag it out, and just like every single other floater we've made, select the faces, inset it, and except for in this case, you're not going to want to subdivide it because that would just be a pain, and it looks fine without it. And now we have this. So now let's get into bending it and making it look a little bit more like this final model, which is slightly bent, not totally. This is kind of bent, but it really bends right here. So what we're going to want to do is make this all a group, and a few problems are going to arise. At least one I know of is this UNSC is not going to work well. So let's leave this out of the group. Select these, go up to Group, and click Group. It will now act all as one object, even though it's not. You can do things like ungroup them, and now they're all individual again. You can group objects and then open them for editing, and then select this handle right here and then group them back. Or sorry, click close. There's other things you can do with groups, but that's not important at the moment. So now that we have this done, let's go to our modifier panel, apply a bend modifier, and we're going to want to, on the x-axis, the y-axis, we're going to want to bend this a little bit more like it would look. Obviously this is not turning out so well, so we're going to want to turn on the limit effect and limit that to about where that edge begins. I mean, again, like I said, this isn't going to be a perfect model. This is really just trying to teach you some basic knowledge that's very important to have. This actually looks pretty terrible, but I'm really hoping that you've learned from it. So that is actually going to be bent one more time. Well, let's not bend that. So that's just a very terrible looking turret thing, or sorry, I guess you could call it a bullet stopper, a barricade. That's a better word. And then let's just build the little end for it. So without actually selecting anything, just use AutoGrid. We're just going to quickly do this because I'm pretty sure I've taught what I need to teach with this tutorial. And then extrude those out. Place your object. Again, there's lots of other ways to do this. I mean, like all things, it comes with practice and getting used to the tools. I'm not claiming to be good at really anything yet. I've only been doing this for 4 months, but my goal is to try to teach you all of the things that I wish I had understood when I started doing 3D, and to make your life a little bit easier and to make you smarter. So now we can see we have a very terrible looking turret, barricade, that we have utilized floaters for. And if you look at it and were to bake this as a normal map, it would look a lot nicer than just a flat, normalless, high poly, completely sharp-edged model. I hope that gave you some sort of an understanding of high poly modeling and using floaters. And I hope you like, favorite, or subscribe to my channel so that way I can teach you more. Sounds good. I'll see you in the next lesson. Bye.